Hinge tips. Hopefully I can get this in frame. Now, I have this repair I'm doing, and it has a seam, and it has a hinge or a catch here. Okay, two pieces on this side and a wide piece on the other half, which is way over here. Oh, see. So what actually happened with this repair is that they used this little tiny wire, which was actually so corroded that when they tried to take it off to, let me get this in frame, when they tried to take it off to get to the light bulb, it ripped part of it off the other side. So I have to replace all of the catches. Now I'm using brass tubing. Okay, let's see if I can set this up correct. Okay, I'm using brass tubing, and one of the things you can, now if you have a Dremel, okay, it has a blade kind of like this, okay, and a Dremel, you can use this to cut the tubing, but it's still going to leave a burr on the inside of the tube. I like to use a little, this is a little tubing cutter made by K&S Metal Center, which also makes the tubes in, this is what's left of a 36-inch tube. Now, you know, when you're using a tubing cutter, you know, I'm just going to do this as a demonstration. This isn't the piece that I need. You tighten it up, make sure it's seated. You give it a few turns, it starts to feel loose. You tighten it up. You don't want to make it so tight that you can't hold on to the tubing and turn it. Now you can hold the tubing with pliers, but you have to be very careful that you don't grip it so tight that you crush the tubing, because that kind of defeats the purpose of having a tube for a hinge. And when you're using tubing, if you're making your own hinges, it doesn't hurt to invest in, you know, a flat file. And this is actually a needle file. I'll show you what that's for, or at least what I use it for. Because when you cutting with a tubing cutter, and even if you cut the tube with a hacksaw or a Dremel, it's still going to leave a burr inside the tube, and you want to alleviate that burr in order for it to work. Okay, now the wire, the brass rod that I'm using for the hinge part is thin enough to just go through here. You tighten it up again, and you just keep doing this. Eventually it'll break off like that, see? And the tubing, the wire that I'm using, it's small enough to go in there, but there's a little bit of resistance. Okay, so this is why you have a needle file. You don't necessarily have to go back and forth with the file. You can just hold the tube and turn it a few times, and that'll alleviate the burr on the inside of the tube. Okay, that's why we have these things, so that when I put this through, it just drops through. There's no resistance. Now, I've had to cut, because I'm replacing all of the catches, I've had to cut 8 of these size and 4 of this size, because basically I'm going to be replacing, let me show you one other thing here. It can be difficult, even if you're careful, sometimes to get solder to flow from the hinge onto the pin, or you know, if your tubing is too tight, it can actually get solder and solder it together. So that's always a pain in the tail. Now this is actually a correction pen or a whiteout pen, and what you can do is, if you can see this or not, is to coat get it to flow, is to coat the end of the tube with whiteout. So I'm coating the outside edge, and I'm trying to coat the inside of the tubing so that when I solder everything together, my solder doesn't flow. I've already prepped some of these. My solder doesn't flow across the tube and solder everything together. Now I know you're saying, oh well, this is so tedious to do that. Well, yes it is, but it's a heck of a lot more tedious to have to get everything apart if you soldered it together. So, and you can get this off with, I guess, acetone or rubbing alcohol, see, after you're done. A small price to pay for being a little bit careful, see. So, and so this is the same thing whether I'm making a hinge for a box or a hinge for God knows what else, okay. Hopefully you can see that. You may have a difficulty. I'm going to let it dry before I go back and do the other end, because basically what I'm doing is it's going to have, and these I have to prep also. I haven't finished prepping these. I haven't finished prepping all of the little tubes, but I wanted to shoot the video to give you guys an idea. Okay. Basically I'm going to have to be putting on one of those and one of these, and then one more little tube, and you know, also what I'm working on, this here repair, it's made out of mica, so you can't go slopping flux all over it because it's a mineral. It's going to be the devil's own thing to clean. So see, so it goes on like this, see. So after I take these two off, I can solder it on, okay, with a little bit of space between. Okay, solder these two to this and be able to take that out, and then, you know, after they're all four done, I'll be able to pull the pin out and they can open that thing up to be able to get to the light bulb. But that is kind of what I'm working on right now. Doesn't hurt to have a needle file around. You know, they make them tinier, they make them smaller. I didn't have wire that small to go through there, and I wasn't going to use the originals because that's also very corroded. It needs to have new pins. It needs to have better pins, better tubing, okay, in order to, you know, once I fix this thing, I don't want it to come back. Alright, but I did want you to see the whiteout tip, because that's very important, very, very important, so you don't solder your hinge together. And it can happen, you know, it can happen. You have flux on there, it migrates to the other tube. You're just trying to, you know, I know you're trying to be careful, but sometimes it does happen. Or if you fill the end with solder before you have your pin, your hinge, okay, then you've got another boondoggle to have to deal with. So that one was too big. Okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these. So I'll be able to put this thing back together. I'll probably wind up doing it tomorrow. It's getting late here, and but I wanted you to see that. So now the other thing that you have to pay attention to, really, because even if you use a Dremel to cut the wire or the rod, you're still going to have a burr that needs to come off, And that's why you have another file to be able to. Or if you have a grinding wheel, you know, if you're doing this and you have your hubby's got a shop and you got a bench grinder, you know, you can clean that up real easy. Real easy. Alright, not have to resort to the file, but not everyone has a bench grinder. You know, not everyone has those tools that make it so much easier. So, like I don't have one, but I do have some needle files, you know. So, because you want to be able to just slide in there, okay, without any resistance. Okay, so that's the demonstration for tonight. Hinge tube hinge tips. This has still got a little bit of a burr on it, you know. But if you cut this with wire cutters, that's what it does. It crushes it slightly, and it makes it a little bit wider so it doesn't fit in the tube like this side. Okay. It doesn't go into the tube. It's just got a little flare, and that has to come off in order for it to fit into the tube. And that's why files are so important to have around. If you don't have it, in fact, you know, if you don't have a Dremel, I do have one, but you know what? I burnt it up today. The thing was smoking. It got hot, and it lost power, and then smoke started coming out of it, and I said, okay, it's toast. I'll have to get another one. Okay, see? Now it just slides on and off. No resistance. So, that's the tips for tonight. I still have to go and coat both ends of these, but you really want to let one end dry before you go back to the other end so you don't rub it off. You know, that can happen. I mean, it's not really a paint, it's really a correction pen or a whiteout pen. Okay. You may have to go, God knows where you get these things these days, but that can be indispensable. Worth having. So thank you. God bless. Good night.